Go live. You are live.
Yes. And so, well, usually I start with a
A countdown.
countdown, but
You want us? We could restart. We could delete this and start from a countdown.
no, it's fine. Anyway, I think the two of us have things to talk about before anybody else joins. But usually I just put the invite into the comments. So if somebody wants to click on it, they can. But nobody's watching yet. And
Oh, good.
the um, the bots haven't noticed that we're live yet, so they haven't put in notices. Let me check to see that we are live on
Sure,
my
you got it.
channel.
And be the punch.
That's not it. That's not it either. Yeah, okay. We're live. The bots know we're live. People can know we're live. There we go.
So, actually, Paul beat me to it because I just see he posted a new video about a clip with regards to your stream, your live stream that he had with you guys yesterday.
Yeah, you actually messaged me the second that I stopped. I finished watching that, so it's funny.
So when I heard it, it's actually so. I'm trying to think if this was already on that live stream or was it on a different live stream or a different clip. But Paul mentioned that he's going to start not holding back his punches anymore. Basically.
Thank God, I've been trying to get the guy to open up for years now.
Okay, and then when you joined the live stream, he actually a little. I don't want to say like I saw. I mean, it was a different Paul. Like he was a little more snippy.
Yeah. I've been saying to him for years, Paul, if you want to say something to me, say something to me. But
so if I didn't know better, which I mean I might not, but like I would almost say like he was like aggravated, but I don't think he was aggravated. I think he was just responding. But and this relates to even something I saw on Grim Grizz's channel when he was having, he just recently hosted Paul in Sevilla, and he was doing some great work over there, as he often does. But he mentioned, like Paul, like I'm occupying your mind, and Paul's like, I'm walking around, and now you are clearly occupying the minds of a lot of people on this channel. And
so Father Eric said a very interesting thing. At the beginning of that chat, when it was just him and Sam, he said that sometimes when he's reading, he starts he's doing something, he starts explaining as if he's explaining to me what he's doing.
So I think, I mean, that's, first of all, in a certain sense, that's amazing because you're being told that you are, in your own sense, shaping this corner of the internet with your presence. However, I think as Paul was talking about that, he himself became aware of that and also decided to sort of address, people are writing to me and asking. And then, he does his video and like, this is all love. So we know that. And I guess my question to you is like, is it really necessary? Because you are showing like this, this love. And then like you mentioned this thing of, I don't know, you were saying Protestants go insane or someone goes insane. He's like, you don't have to use that terminology. So I guess I'm asking you, do you find it beneficial? And is there any, and you could tell me like, don't psychoanalyze me, but is there any, do you think any of this could be a reaction of your own nervousness about this conversation? Because, you come at this and being like, some rabbis could be, against me even having this conversation with you, Paul, or my involvement in here. So is there any sense where you have to feel for yourself, like if I'm not pushing back, then like like then I'm just going with the flow. Like there has to be a distinction, and I need to make it very clear.
Okay, so I mean, now I have to fall back on Jordan Peterson. What the hell, the hell do I know about why I do stuff, right? And as far as psychoanalyzing myself and the various components of my consciousness congress, but there's definitely a Satmar Rav in my consciousness congress who's saying, you're talking to a Galach who is whose entire life is dedicated to the Trinity. And like, as much as I can try to convince Yosef that at least some form of shituf is okay for Gentiles, and this whole internal argument we can have within Judaism about like how much of Christianity is completely outside of anything we should at all have anything to do with, right? And well, did you listen to my discussion with Lee Baker?
So I did, and I also, I mean, Paul also discusses that sort of that he's like, he wasn't aware of this like Noahide community so much. So,
and a lot of those Noahides, look, Tovia Singer is the only real rabbi who's actually in any way engaging with the Noahide community.
Yes, however, like he would be a lot more like his style is a lot more adversarial, and
he's more adversarial than I am.
Right, so like he would not fly. Well, because yes, he's more adversarial than you are, and I know that he's very gentle and kind when he's talking to Christians. So I don't think he's ever coming in bad faith, but he's not having a conversation. He's not going to entertain, like maybe the Trinity means this, and in Judaism we can incorporate that. He wants none of that. And I guess I'm asking you because you have these conversations where you seemingly you have this channel, and this is why this is sort of happening, because you are a perfect example of good faith in a certain extent, because here's my channel, take my channel, the icon of Jesus. It's like a very safe place. So like even Eric and Sam are there, and they're like, we're live streaming from Jacob's channel while talking about Jacob. So
it's not. So I actually think the word good, the idea of good faith isn't what's behind this. I think what I see is a transparency and a collapsing of different publics. So when I was an undergrad, I studied public relations, and we talked about communicating to different publics, right? And anytime we're communicating with someone, and this is something that Vervaeke says that's really important. He points out somebody stops in front of me and says, I'm out of gas. And I say to him, there's a gas station down the block, right? So all of the ways that interaction could be misunderstood is huge, right? Obviously, when the guy says, I'm out of gas, first of all, he's not actually out of gas. Second, he's the car he is in is almost out of gas, right? And because of the context and the relationship, we understand all of these things that are communicated implicitly, right? So when you speak to different publics, when you speak in different ways, you necessarily need to speak to them in the ways that they can understand each other. Like, so when I speak to you and I say, well, right now I was just thinking about how, in Shar Yichud Ve'emuna, the Alter Rebbe talks about Chanuch Lanar Al Pi Darko, right? We understand each other. Guess what? Nobody else, like maybe Yosef, he doesn't study Tanya, understood what I just said. Nobody else did, right?
Yeah, but Jacob, but you're in such a special position, and I see that Yosef discusses this as well. You happen to be in this position where you're fairly well versed, and maybe I'm wrong. I guess from my position, you're very well versed with the Christianity's teachings, and there's that allows you sort of to engage in and they're interested in that engagement. I wanna do something for a second. I know I sent you this in the past. I want to read this out for a minute, and I'm going to do like a loose translation, but I want to frame this into our conversation. So I sent you in the past. 1 second, it should be up over here. I sent you in the past this conversation of Yaakov Emden. I want to just read this out for a second. So Yaakov Emden, this is around 300 years ago. So this is what he says.
I read it out and translated it in my discussion with Father Stephen. You didn't.
I didn't hear that. Really?
I read it out and translated.
Well, do you have the translation with you already or no?
I did it off the top of my head.
Okay, so I'm going to
try. Word I didn't understand.
I'm going to attempt to do the same.
Your Hebrew is much better. Your Hebrew is much better than mine.
Okay, so it says the Christian has done the world a double favor, right? On one hand,
the Nazarene has done the world, Hanotzri,
okay. Hanotzri, correct. He strengthened Moses' Torah with all his might. There is not one of our sages that spoke about who had a mouthful about the Torah and Moses' Torah with such a positive attitude and eternal lasting for the Torah. Okay. Second, this was also to the benefit of the whole world, where they got rid of idol worship. He taught them the 7 laws of Noah, integrated the 7 laws of Noah, gave them, taught them about morality. And Christians are communities that are working for L'Shem Shamayim, which is like on behalf of God, on behalf of the heavens. And that is what they're trying to achieve. They have the proper orientation. Their kavana, how would you translate
intent?
Kavana? Their intent is true and for the heavens and for God, and their reward, their sachar, won't be denied. Okay.
Okay. Read that last part in Hebrew because there's a word there I didn't understand.
V'scharam lo yimana.
No, that I understood right before it. I don't have the.
Notzrim hem kehilot shepoalot l'shem shamayim shenoadu lehesegam.
Lehesegam? What's lehesegam?
Yeah, heseg is an accomplishment.
Like lahasig, to reach.
Yes, lahasig.
Oh, it's that word. There's a vav there.
No. Hey yud shin gimel yud mem.
Okay, lahasigam. Okay, yeah.
So, given that contents, okay, so you have, and this is one, and there's others, but he's clearly framing to you. Now, you can come and say like, well, why didn't Rav Emden come and say that Paul was this? Or why did he not come and say that Mark was that? His attitude was more like, guys, let's put that aside. Okay, I'm letting you know right now that Christians are oriented properly. They are, they are putting God's name on blast around the world, and more. Not only that, they deserve they're worthy of reward, and that dovetails with the conversation we had in the past about how not only can a Gentile be quote unquote at the level of an Israelite, they could be at the level of a high priest. Okay,
but Chezi, that Rav Yaakov Emden is not a favorite Rav Yaakov Emden that all the Rabbanim are speaking about, and I'm sure.
No problem. No, I'm not coming on Judaism right now. No problem. I'm talking to you, Jacob, right now. Okay, you're aware of this. You're reading this to Father Stephen. So when I guess I'm asking you, when you are aware of that, part of me wants to say Shouldn't that always be the framing? Now you could tell me, listen, Chazi, I am in good faith. I am showing love. I do love Paul. I do love all these characters, but I'm speaking my truth. When I'm speaking my truth, this is what it sounds like.
Okay. So Paul, when Paul put the discussion from yesterday on his channel, let me pull up what I wrote. So the comment I made was, "This Jacob sounds like a great guy," and Paul answered, "He is, but he doesn't always help others see his good qualities." And I answered him, "I doubt being quiet would help you see my good qualities. See Rabbi Yosef, who doesn't say things as provocatively as I do. There is not a lot of daylight between what I believe and what Rabbi Yosef believes from your perspective. Yet you aren't making videos about understanding Yosef." And the fact is, there isn't a lot of daylight between what all three of us believe, right? And I keep on bringing up the things that are daylight. I could stop talking about your Zionism, Rahman al-Islam, right? And I could stop bringing up the Trinity, Rahman al-Islam, right? But then we wouldn't have these discussions.
But I feel like there is a.
Am I doing it perfectly? Okay, guess what? I'm not perfect. Guess what? I'm not perfect.
Jacob, of course. I guess part of this corner though allows you. I mean, you have access to, if you're willing to accept it. There's some feedback, right? So now I agree with you that that's a good point. Like, listen, guys, people are talking about my channel, right? And I'm not saying this from like an ego point of view, just saying like this is moving the conversation forward. Even more so from a Talmud perspective, you're like, guys, like relax. You know what I mean? I'm just giving you like some fiery Talmud attitude. Give it back to me. I can handle it. So first of all, not everyone is aware of that context. And like to me, when Paul is saying like it's all love and like it's a term in Hebrew called a chiddush. It's like, whoa, like this is like they said, like it's just something so interesting to us. However, speaking adversarially while in the context of love is something that's very, very relevant in the Talmud. And I know there was you were mentioning about some comments, people saying like, the Talmud's like all about like battling. And obviously they're not so aware of like, the deep insight of the Talmud, but you could slowly bring people into that. And I think you are always trying to do a balance where you're obviously trying to, be kind. However, like, I think you're so much more influential and powerful in this corner. And by powerful, I mean more influential, is if you would potentially allow more people to come into your tent and not necessarily feel threatened. Now, that doesn't mean you can't say controversial things that will potentially cause them to feel uncomfortable. But for sure that if you're going to say like you're insane, you're just going to have a hard time handling that. So
should we let it go on here? So
things like that.
Yeah,
right? We could just like.
So when you said you wanted to talk, I took Happy for a walk, and I was thinking about what you were going to say, and then I pretty much guessed exactly what you were going to say, and I was trying to figure out how I would respond, and what came to me is Kol ha'olam kulo gesher tsar me'od v'ha'ikar lo lafachad klal. And I'll let you explain that one.
Well, do you feel like the stakes are so high? Like, I'm with you that you should feel fearless. But are these stakes at this stage of this little corner of the internet? Do you feel like at this point, at any time I hear a sign that I feel like it's challenging, I'm going to call it out? Because, I mean, just like Paul's doing with like his rando conversations, I'm sure there's a lot of eye rolling, and I'm sure you could be like, well, what am I spending my time doing this? However, by allowing, doing that graciously.
Chezi, you still haven't explained for the audience what I said.
Kol Olam Kulo Gesher Tsar Me'od. The whole world is a very narrow bridge. V'ha'ikar lo lefached klal. But the main thing is to not have any fear while trying to cross this bridge. But I would say it comes about bridges of meaning. You know what I mean? Like
it's a famous Hasidic statement that is saying on a very common that a lot. And the fact is, I think what Rabbi Nachman was meant when he said that is we are it's that the world is a very narrow bridge. We're walking on a razor wire. And yeah, it's difficult. And you know what? It would be a lot easier for me to do to delete my channel.
You're not going to get any pushback from me, and this is part of this conversation, which is like, there's nothing wrong with the struggle or stumbling up the hill while trying to do this. However, using that analogy of a bridge, in this context, this whole community is trying to build this bridge with you, or at the very least, standing there on the other side trying to stabilize it. So, and by that I mean, and I'm not speaking specifically for Sam or for Paul or for anyone in this community, but everyone's sort of coming into this being like, if I could, like when we're saying sharing notes, it's hard to, and if you're lucky, there are notes that you're giving people, Jacob, that's causing pause, and people are thinking about that and recalibrating themselves. But if the notes are happening, with like a lot of noise and people can't really hear that signal, then I'm nervous, then it's just less productive. Again, you're the one with the channel. They're talking about you. So, you're doing your thing. I just wonder, and I'm saying even you want to get your point across, does it necessarily have to happen that way?
Okay, so Mark says, now you're just being an extremist, pretending that if you cannot be harsh, you cannot have a channel. That is a bit overboard. This is precisely the type of thing being complained about. It is precisely the type of thing being complained about.
Be harsh. Be harsh. You could be intense. You don't have to back down from your conversation. It's really about the specific words that we're using, and as someone that is as articulate as you, and because I'm sure you could find any argument you're going to give them about Paul, you could come on the other hand and say,
okay, all I can say is if you can do it better, which I actually think you might be able to do, I welcome you to stream on my channel, because frankly, you know far more about Judaism than I do. Your Hebrew is much better than mine is. And you're a stylish, happening guy who was
a much better hairdo.
Much better hairdo. Even if it is chotzetz when you put on tefillin.
much appreciated. However, my fear would be, and this is where I was having a conversation with Lance and Jess and Shari on we were having a conversation, and there was a lot of convergence, and we were agreeing about a lot of things. And I have to wonder to myself, it could be that I'm misunderstanding the terminology they're using about Christianity, or the terminology, just their specific jargon, and that's because I'm less well-versed than you are in this field, and that's why you have a very specific position over here. I know, sure, there's a lot I know about Judaism, and I use, this for me, I'm learning a lot in a certain sense also about my own religion, because I'm looking at it from a different perspective. On the other hand, you have a lot of commentary on the New Testament, which I don't really have those tools. So yes, I could participate in these conversations, but you are in a very, very unique position, I think. And while there could be people like we said, Tovia Singer, that is also extremely well versed, that is a completely different attitude, one which doesn't fit over here.
You know what, Rabbi Skobach, I think does a much better job than Tovia Singer does, and he's just as available as Tovia Singer is. Yet people on BOM know who Tovia Singer is, and as much as I try to amplify Rabbi Skobach's voice, it's Tovia Singer who gets all the attention.
I see Mark writing over here. can you understand the threat? If I cannot be me, I'm taking my channel and leaving. Yes, of course. The question is like, if I cannot be me, like, you know, as a parent, there's a personality that was who I was. I got married, and then when I'm dealing with my kids, I can't just be me. I'm going to have to play around with that while trying to deal with my children, with the people I'm working with. So even your channel, it's your rules. You have your categorizations. You could kick someone off. But if we want more people coming back, and by the way, it could be I'm completely wrong, and the flavor of the day is, 8 level of harshness, and that's what people want. I guess, I don't know. I mean, the feedback you're hearing is the feedback you're hearing, let's say, from Paul, and he's saying, I'm getting calls, and people are quote unquote bothered by this. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to stop. It just means like, are we interested in having a conversation with those people that are bothered?
Okay. Look, I certainly hear what you're saying. It's not like you're saying anything that I think is not something I should constantly be concerned about. It is. At the same time, I'm trying to walk across a gesher, right? I'm trying to walk around walk this bridge, right? And part of the problem is that the audiences have been collapsed. I can no longer say things in a way unless I start speaking in Hebrew, right? There's lots of things that I could be saying right now that if I said them in English, people would lose their effing minds because they wouldn't understand what I'm saying, right? And to some extent, speaking in Hebrew helps with that. And there are things we've said on my channel that, frankly, if we had said them in English, or I had said them in English, people would be clipping, and if to the extent they even care what I say, and misunderstanding completely. So it's a huge problem when all your publics, all your audiences are collapsed, right? Where everything you say has to be understood by everyone at the same time in the same way, which is impossible. And a lot of people, and this is what I have, the understanding I have reached is the problem with the culture of discussion that we have right now is that all the smart people are like, well, if I'm not careful enough about my words, right, then maybe I shouldn't. And then so the only people who talk are the people with Dunning-Kruger, who are too stupid to realize what they say is going to be misunderstood, at least by some people, when they speak in public.
I'm going back to stumbling up the hill. So I definitely think, first of all, as long as that's the orientation I'm going upwards, then again, there's zero judgment from stumbling, and it should be very clear. Like, obviously you could ignore all of this, but like when you say you're a rabid Zionist, I don't take any offense to that. Obviously, I'm not like, I can't handle this right now. Why is he saying that? But you could understand how someone would be like, why did he keep calling me that? You know what I mean? Like, why does he say that? Now that it's tongue in cheek. Now you could be like, there's a kernel of truth in there. Like, he has a real issue with that, and he's touching upon that. But then the question would be, does it make more sense then to be like, hey, I really want to talk to you about that. Let's flush this out. Or is it just like, and again, putting Chazi aside, if you hammer that on the head, whether it's like, Paul's a liar, you're a rabid Zionist, I don't know if that's beneficial. You ripping into someone that you feel like is talking nonsense, I'm totally for that. Ideally, you want to rip into him in a normal way, but in a respectable way, which again, like you're saying, it's very hard to do that.
Calling people stupid even when true is not helpful. It shuts people off. I completely disagree with that. I think the problem is there are people who are idiots who should be excluded from the conversation. I'm not at all.
1 second. Jacob, I'm with you that you could say, listen, if decisions are being made like on a policy level right now, we need to have qualified people making decisions. When you're having a discussion, right? When you're having a discussion on this scale, right? I really feel like, which relates to the concept of Shivim Panim LaTorah, the 70 faces of the Torah. I know you're saying no, right? And I'm not saying that any 70 faces of the Torah doesn't mean any idea is acceptable. Hear this out as you nod your head, as you shake your head. In this, definitely at this stage, and Grim Grizz was talking about this as well, that people should be sending videos. There should be a hierarchy, and all those videos should come to Paul, so he should see the top 3 because he's busy, so he should decide. But right now, I think it's still the time for just more. And that's fine if we disagree about that. That's totally okay. I want to mention,
there's way too much content in this corner of the internet already.
Yeah, there's
I read
doing this.
Sorry, go ahead.
Flipping. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Chad, you were saying.
I was just saying there are plenty of us. I mean, I think there could be more of us who are doing the clipping stuff. I mean, it's like the turtle eggs thing. You know, a turtle lays like 100 eggs in hopes that maybe 5 survive. So that's kind of what's happening. I'm definitely one of the dying turtles, but I'm a turtle nonetheless. And I don't think people aren't misunderstanding anything that you're saying, unless you're speaking in a language that we can't understand. But it's not a matter of misunderstanding the things that you're saying. I think it's the same reason why people got all bent out of shape when Peterson put up the Twitter ban video. It's like, I mean, we're soft ass Westerners, man, and we don't like to be poked in our axioms. And our main axioms that we have, I think, are more self-centered. So when, it's like about my character, and like, so when I hear Jacob, like, I was calling it dunking. It's like, oh man, but you're better than that. And like, you could say the same thing without saying it that way. And I don't think you should, I don't know. It's just a matter of, well, hell, you can do anything you want. I think it's great what you're doing in general. You're like providing a platform for basically almost exclusively Christians, which I think is hilarious. And you're pulling people together to have conversations of all different sorts. And the people that are messaging Paul about, why are you talking to him? You shouldn't talk to him, blah, 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 all this stuff. It's like, who really gives a shit anyway? It's part of my language. I mean, honestly, seriously, like those people, I don't know.
Well, Chad, let's ask and I want to preface this with this. It says in no way a pylon or an intervention. Is just, I believe all of us working together, obviously, because we see how beneficial this is. I would ask Sam, because Sam was having this conversation yesterday. What are your thoughts? I mean, thinking about this.
I've already pushed Jacob a fair amount on back when we were talking about the incident, non-incident in Germany about and the changing of Chad's channel name, about how to talk about things in a way that didn't turn off people that shouldn't be turned off unnecessarily. And so I feel like I am hearing a lot of the same points that I was making at that time to Jacob being echoed by you, and I agree with a lot of it. I mean, part of it, like Jacob doesn't turn me off as much as he turns other people. Maybe I have a higher tolerance for disagreeability. I also grew up around a lot of Jews, and I know that's just kind of the way a lot of you guys are, and it's just a cultural thing. And like, I get it. And, I'm a more buttoned up WASP who doesn't, say mean things as much directly, but, a WASP who grew up around a lot of Jews. So I kind of get it. But I mean, I do think that, I don't know, I feel like it's good to keep your sword in its sheath as much as you possibly can so that it's as sharp as it can be when you do pull it out. And I think that Jacob is a little bit, pulls out his sword too much. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be pulled out sometimes.
Does it need to even be a sword at this, or does it need to be more a scalpel and more specific? You know, I read this small little portion of this rabbi that came out, was very pro-Christian. Now, I don't know if you noticed, Jacob, but I glossed over something he said in Hebrew. Something he said in Hebrew over there. He mentioned
Behemoth Hasadeh? Yeah, exactly. I translated that, and
this is a perfect case study. It's a beautiful, he gives two beautiful reasons why he loves the Christians and why they deserve all, they're fantastic people. And this is part of the whole discussion, like, are these people liberated, or is Abraham's mission for everyone? The answer is yes. Now, in that sentence, he mentions that how great it is that Christianity came to the world because it took the Gentiles and aside from teaching them morality, they are no longer like the field animals. The wild animals. Now, why do I need to say that? Now, he's mentioned that in a certain context. I could understand how someone hears that and be like, well, why on earth would he say that? Now, when I was reading that together, it didn't help me to mention that he, for historical purposes and other reasons, had mentioned
it. Do you realize what the problem with that is? Because you just
self-censoring.
It's beyond that. It's you did that on the internet, and somebody who knows the Hebrew can then go pull it up and say, "See, he's not telling you everything."
But that's that. I don't know if that person that's pulling up the clip to then point out and say, even though this is all about loving your fellow Christian, there's a comment over there that could be misread, and Chezi didn't give it to you, because Chezi
himself, it's an admission of guilt on your part. That's what they're going to say. It's an admission of guilt on your part that you censored that part. So you yourself see that it obviously is speaking horribly of the Gentiles, which they don't think are human, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I know. So I don't think that they're not human. I'm doing exactly what he did. I'm just doing it 300 years later. At the time, he was radical compared to his contemporaries. Now I'm
Hold on. That Rav Yaakov Emden is radical today.
I understand.
You could quote that Rav Yaakov Emden in any shul in Israel, and frankly, a lot of the Zionist shuls they would kick you out of.
Agreed, but here in this corner, we're trying to have a conversation which is evolving, and part of it is me taking that wisdom we have and building on top of it.
It's all about the chest lettuce. It is all about the chest lettuce.
Chest lettuce?
Hey,
yes, you're showing chest hair.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
you're not very tsanua, you know that?
Well, I'm interested, Chad and Sam. How do you guys see that? Do you guys think that is very problematic that I decided to gloss over that translation because I just felt it wasn't beneficial? It doesn't help what we're trying to learn from this rabbi, and it could only be offensive.
Yeah, you want to go first, Sam?
Go ahead, Chad.
Well, I'm just going to say what I always say. Like, I this is something a tool that I would use all the time. At the bottom of all of this, for me, fundamentally, it's about trying to be of service to somebody in potential there's a potential of being useful to somebody, and like so far as even maybe be the potential of actually saving somebody's life and helping somebody potentially. And so I use the tools that I've used in Alcoholics Anonymous is like everybody has the right to be wrong. And so sometimes a truth might be completely detrimental and actually harmful to somebody. And so I try to just like meet them where they are as best as I can. Even though, like, say if somebody's like, I believe like my higher power is like the doorknob or something, I don't give a shit. Like, honestly, like if you think that that's gonna help you in that, fine. And so like that principle, I think, can kind of carry over to what you're kind of like what the tool that you just used there, where you didn't say the quote exactly or what. Who cares? Like, at the end of the day, honestly, like, how important is it really? I think Sherry in your conversation yesterday said best, like, we all have these Sunday school answers, and it's blocking us from having actual real relationships with each other. And I think we're trying to find it. And Jacob, you're doing a great job of providing a platform that we can try and work through this stuff. That's the point. And I think so when people are like bothered, it's like, oh, he's giving a platform and he's like, he's potentially putting you in a position for it to crumble. Don't do that, so totally off base. But anyways, y'all should just become alcoholics and take 12 steps, and you'll see the truth.
I don't have enough alcohol.
It's a hero's journey, though. We have to first become alcoholics and then make our way to the 12 steps. I got you. Okay.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, Hezi, to answer your question, like, so that, comment that you didn't translate, that was something like, oh, well, maybe the Christians aren't exactly wild beasts after all, or something like that, with kind of the implication that that is often how Jews have thought of Christians in the past, right? But it also means something like it's related to unclean and, the other sorts of categories like that. But it's still, no matter how you contextualize it, perhaps not a thing that most people would consider a nice thing to say, no matter what the religious context, right? And most
Correct.
people would get the connotation of being compared to wild animals, right?
Correct.
Every culture basically understands that that's probably not a compliment. And so I think that part of what's going on, I feel like Christianity and Judaism, the relationship was fundamentally changed after the Holocaust and World War II, right? The Catholics, all sorts of Protestants and whatever were like, wait a minute, whoa, even though those Nazis weren't really Christians, there was still way more Christian history and motivation in there than we're comfortable to really admit and stuff like that. And like, we don't want that to ever happen. Never again. Right. And America started using words like Judeo-Christian values as opposed to just Christian values, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there was this sort of welcoming into trying to create an identity that could handle both Christians and Jews together in the West. And I think that it was mostly a unilateral move by Christians, right? Jews didn't change their theological views of Christians much. It was mainly a unilateral move on behalf of Christians trying to change their theological views of Jews. And I think that I think the interesting question is for this corner, Jacob has talked a lot about how a lot of Jews would be mad at what Jacob is doing because it's close to evangelism or something like that. And that's a very, forbidden sort of thing. And that it's flirting with this line. And Jacob is this sort of liminal figure who's kind of like half in, half out of Judaism. And so he plays this sort of weird, interesting role, which is part of Jacob's value, regardless of how disagreeable his personality is this sort of half in, half out kind of Jewish thing. And so I think it'll be interesting, like an example of this sort of conversation, I've heard lots of Christians talk about, well, should we think of the Mormons as Christians or not? It's like, well, have you ever asked the Mormons what they think of you and whether or not they care and whether or not they want you to even put them in the same category? Yeah, sure, they don't want you to persecute them. I can bet you that. But Mormons actually don't really have very high opinions of most mainstream Christians if you ask them, right? And so it's this weird unilateral thing of, well, how do we integrate this fringe thing without actually ever thinking about the fringe thing's perspective on the whole matter? And I suppose I can be more able to take the outsider perspective because of my heresy and stuff like that, while most of the time existing within mainstream Christianity. So I don't know. I think the question is for Jews is, what do you guys want out of this, right? We Christians kind of know, but and Christians, of course, now in the post-Holocaust world want to be more welcoming of Jews as possible. And we also have this lurking insecurity that you guys know the Old Testament better than we do. And, but it's still our scriptures too, and all of those sorts of questions. But I guess, what is it that Jews want out of this? And how should that affect what we're thinking about it at all?
Okay, let me
Take it away.
This conversation is going somewhere, and I want to take it a little bit differently. So Sam keeps on getting kicked out of churches.
I'm in one now that hasn't. I have been excommunicated from a church before. I have been kicked out of a Christian fellowship before, and the current church that I go to could, on a whim, kick me out at any time.
What do they know?
Yeah,
It's beyond that. It's beyond that. I've been trying to get Sam to start a church because for me, the idea that somebody would kick Sam out as opposed to be afraid of Sam leaving, right, is topsy-turvy inverted from where the hierarchy should be.
But I do have to be, regardless of whether I'm kicked out or not, I do have to basically be quiet about my beliefs. And there's subjects I just can't talk about with other members of the church. And only like 3 or 4 people in the church know what I think about stuff. And none of them even particularly know about my YouTube personality. One of them used to, but he moved to a different church. Chad is probably pointing to himself saying ditto. Yeah, which I believe.
Yeah, I kicked out. I just leave them. So.
Look, I would no longer. I mean, when I was younger, I taught it's called a yeshiva. It's you learn Judaic studies over there, philosophy, and if they knew I was doing this, they would not be okay with me teaching in that school anymore. So Jacob is definitely correct that. That's something you need to be sensitive. And obviously you guys have to be sensitive about that as well. However, when you're asking why are we here? And this is part of the conversation I was having with Paul. And I was sort of asking him, how do you see our involvement here? Where do you see, what are we to you guys? And now you were saying you guys know where you guys are, but what do you guys want from here? So first I would challenge, do you guys know what you guys want necessarily?
Well, maybe not.
Other personalities over here. So, again, I see something new growing over here, and there's the feeling that it's oriented properly, and it's constantly trying to do that. So that's something I want to be involved in. Number one. Number two, in Judaism, you are correct that while you're saying after the Holocaust, there was sort of an olive branch from the Christian side, and as far as the Jewish side, it was always we're little Jews. What do we want from us? I think that Judaism only now, and I know you're going to roll your eyes about this, Jacob. And again, just because due to security reasons, political reasons, social reasons, are in a position to start rediscovering and rediscussing our own heritage. And for many years, even though when now Jacob says so much of the Christian Bible and I when I talk to Jesus, when I hear about Jesus, I hear about a Talmudic figure. Judaism was aware of this, and part of what Father DeYoung was talking about when he was talking about Acher and having the 2 authorities in heaven. These are little remnants of that conversation, which we squashed due to political reasons, and we're we can't have this conversation. So we are the first generation. When I say we, I mean me, that is sort of rediscovering this and rethinking about this. However, for my mother or my grandparents, this is too heavy for them. They're not ready to have this discussion. But the reason I skipped that term of like, like the wild animals was just because we're no longer using that jargon, and its jargon's just not beneficial. And oh, you're hating this, Jacob. We're not using that jargon because we want something else. And if I want to try to go back, and that doesn't mean that we find ourselves in union, that we're all now doing the same thing. However, if the conversation is a lot more similar, that's where we want to be heading. And if there's point of agreement, then that's where we want to be heading, because that's the real olive branch. It's not just saying Judeo-Christian values, it's recognizing the truth on that, I guess. And as a Jew, Sam, what I want is, I want, in a certain extent, the more you guys talk about Christianity and Judaism, I get to see Judaism in a different light, and that allows me to better appreciate my Judaism, which I think is the same.
And yeah, vice versa. Yeah, from
Right?
this perspective. Yeah.
So what we're talking about is something that I've been trying to bring up around us all for a long time, is what primary purpose, because I think that that's an important thing. I mean, for me, I would hope that we're able to have autonomy and unity at the same time, and be able to freely discuss those things, and actually have friendships. Like, that's important. And whatever's going on out there, who cares, honestly? And for those that can't handle the idea of autonomy, unity at the same time, I mean, this isn't going. I don't think this is a good place for you, to be quite honest.
By autonomy, do you just mean non-ideological conversion and coercion?
I'm happy that Jacob is a particular kind of Jew,
Right.
and that Sam is a particular kind of Christian, and you are a particular kind of Christian with your ideas, and Paul is a Calvinist, and Eric is a Catholic, and Jonathan Peugeot is an icon carver, and John Berbeke is a cognitive scientist. I'm happy that all of that's happening, and we're not willing to kill each other or even come close to it. We're actually more interested, just for the sake of being interested and being able to see, can unity actually happen?
So,
But just like
the piece, when I want to join in, I mean, this is Jacob and Sam and Chad have heard this 100 times probably, but what you see and hear depends a lot upon where you're standing and the kind of person you are. If you do not have ideological diversity, and part of that is rooted in, or part of that is connected, especially in a modern consciousness, around self-identity. If you preclude systematically your community around people who self-identify intellectually other than you, you're going to be blind to a lot of crap.
Yeah,
and that's a dumb idea.
I think another part of this is that, I mean, Judaism as it exists now has a lot of anti-Christian antibodies in its beliefs and practices that have been built up over a very long period of time to keep Jews from converting to Christianity, because it was absolutely necessary for Judaism to preserve its own identity for darn near 2,000 years in a Christian context. And Lord knows lots of Jews did convert to Christianity from a spectrum of voluntary to involuntary, right? And that the Judaism that has resisted that process is the one that's still around. And that process has a lot of antibodies to resist, to maintain its own identity in a Christian context. And I think what's interesting is that, you know, like I was saying, sort of Christianity extended an olive branch over to Judaism after World War II. And Judaism was, for the most part, like, well, gee, thanks. Yeah, we certainly don't want to be killed again. But, thanks for the nice gift, right, without offering much back. And I think what's happening is that, you know, maybe Judaism is getting to a place where it can reevaluate some of these things in terms of what it thinks about Christianity and the details of that, you know, first, second, third centuries AD and what all was talked about, because so much of that was just lid on it, squashed. Here's the right answer. We can't ever go back and look at those sorts of questions again as part of that process of preventing, you know, Jewish absorption into Christianity. And so I think that that's part of what this corner is offering to Jews, but that's also a little bit scary too.
But what if the goal is not converting? What if the goal is to just have interfaith midrash?
Well, okay. Now you're being Luke.
You damn right I am.
So part of when Kazi was speaking, so I do believe we are in a very different time. I don't believe it's for the same reasons. But look, there are parts of the Talmud that were censored, and parts of Maimonides that were censored, and parts of everything that was censored. And believe it or not, the burning of the Talmud in Paris, was it almost 1,000 years ago, is still a fresh wound in Judaism. When there was that fire at Notre Dame, I'm not saying this was a common view, but there were people who were in the Jewish community who were like, yeah, that's right. That's what you get when you burn the Talmud, you know?
1,000 years later.
Yes.
But that's ignorance, Jacob.
Okay, no, yes, it's ignorance. And that ignorance is partially caused by the fact that our Talmuds are in fact censored, and we don't talk about Jesus. We don't at all.
I know, but I guess I ask you, Jacob, like in this day and age, you have the channel, you're doing it right now. You're saying we don't talk about Jesus, but we do talk about Jesus. You're doing it now. Your icon is Jesus. So this is part of the conversation I was having you about, like within Judaism, you know, we're here now. There isn't an authority that we look to and says like, oh, he's going to decide what we do right now. There's different factions, and there's 2,000 years worth of baggage, which doesn't allow, like, you know, as far as our codex, there's so many fences. We're not even sure, you know, what's divine, what's not divine, what the rabbis say. And then this is the first time we could really catch our breath and re-examine. And I think it behooves us to do so. Definitely, like when, like you're talking about such an extreme, our reaction to be when a house of prayer is being destroyed at this day and age, knowing our perspective, is to be consoling them and crying with them. Potentially even, you could say like donating is problematic. Some rabbis would say donate to building a church, but there's definitely be us reaching out to them. And yet,
Chazi, you're preaching to the choir. I'm not the type of person who's like, you know, who was somehow happy that Notre Dame was burning down.
Of course, Jacob. No one thinks.
And that's not the thing. Look, yes, we need to have a conversation within Judaism, and I am perfectly willing to have that conversation with anybody who wants to have that conversation with me. But I am a much more liminal figure than you are, first of all. Second, when it comes down to it, when I am talking to Christians, there's a reason why Christians will be like, yeah, that's a Jew. And that's the exact same reason why there are Christians who say he's anti-Christian, because I am willing to say the things about Christianity which Jews need to actually let Christians know about. And when Christians get mad at me over what I say about Paul, my only answer is, excuse me, look at what Paul says about Moses.
Okay, but Luke mentioned, you were saying, you know, this is not really converting someone. We're having this conversation, and you were like, you know, Luke's being Luke. But I ask you, Jacob, and we mentioned this before, like, you know, it will be named a house of prayer to all nations, right? So that's not everyone converting. And my question to you, I feel from this corner of the internet, like it would totally be sort of normal for me to invite, for me, just because I'm a Levite, but for me to invite people to the temple and sort of feel at home with that, would be like, oh, I totally want to come to prayer in the temple. But if the conversation is...
Hold on, Chazi. And I'm sorry, people, but I can't really do this. This doesn't automatically switch people based on whether they're speaking, and I was trying to do it for a while. But what do you want to say, Chad?
I was going to say, that's like, Chazi, that's a total alcoholic thing to say. I'm like, alcoholics, we meet in the, like, we don't care what church it's in. Hey, they got a building. They said they'll put up, we can rent from them. And you got a room full of people of all kinds of beliefs in the same room, all seeking God. Isn't that strange? And it's working.
But I'm a little bit more, even though partially because I have been kicked out of churches for what I believe, I am a little bit more sympathetic to, you know, and I've spent decades trying to figure out why would that happen, right? Why in the world would a church care about whether or not I could affirm this statement that's almost never talked about from the pulpit, right? You know, what's going on there, right? And this dates back like 1700 years when the world's going on there, right? And I've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and while I certainly have my problems with it, I'm somewhat sympathetic to the needs of a religious community to define itself and have a pretty clear distinction between in-group and out-group, such that, you know, because religions treat people in their in-group differently than they treat people in their out-group in terms of financial generosity, who you can marry, you know, sending your kids to school, right? You know, like, and those are just some obvious things. There's a million subtler things than that too. But some of those things are a very big deal, no matter, you know, how you slice it. And that some of those things are built in at such a deep level to maintain group identity, and it's the groups that exist now are the ones that have maintained their identity. And who is better at maintaining group identity in harsh circumstances than Jews? But even Christians have their own various ways of not being absorbed into other kinds of churches and that sort of thing. And that this is, you know, part of it, and that how people convert and change and stuff like that, and how you can have free and open conversations but still be loyal and respectful to the group that you belong to that cares about some of those sorts of things, is an interesting difficulty. I don't think it's insurmountable, but it shouldn't be disregarded as a useless concern.
So Tyler says, one time tell us why the book of Hebrews might not be a crime scene. How many times in your life have you heard about why the book of Hebrews might not be a crime scene? And how many times have you heard about why it would be thought a crime scene? No, I mean, honestly, this idea that I need to kowtow to something I don't believe in at all. The book of Hebrews is a theological crime scene.
You don't, Jacob, but also like the way that you interact with, like, my conversations with you are completely different than my conversations with Yosef.
Correct.
Completely different. And it's just because of temperament. Okay, I gotta go. Well, I like both of you. You're just different. I gotta go.
But
yeah. And look, I would like to think that I know plenty of people like Yosef who will have nice, polite discussions with you. Guess what? They're not having a channel like mine.
What? But Jacob, 1 second. But I mean, I read some of Yosef's comments, and, you know, like you saying, it's more tiptoeing, and, like, you know, well, I'll have to disagree with you. But even this book of Hebrews right now, right? So you could come and say, like, as I'm saying this, it's very important for me not to sound like preachy and not to sound like I definitely don't want this in any sense to feel like a gang up at all. It's just
look, Chezi, ultimately, yes, it's possibly Luke. I'm taking you off for now. How about we just have a conversation and we stop with all this self-editing and all this tiptoeing and actually have a conversation?
But, like, if Jacob, if you and I wanted to talk about the book of Hebrews, and you've heard me say that the book of Hebrews is my favorite book of the New Testament, right? If you and I wanted to have a conversation about it, you saying it's a theological crime scene, I'm not sure how to, like, maneuver around that into, like, a deeper and more open conversation on the topic, because it's so absolutist and inflammatory.
In a group setting or one-on-one? Because I believe one-on-one, Sam, you'd be able to tackle that easier because, okay, I get what you're saying. So, like, let's talk. Let's dive into that. But Jacob, challenge him, right? Come and say,
look. Ultimately, the only way you're going to be able to do that is to say, no, actually, the book of Hebrews is the best book in the Bible. And we will have to explain why I think, obviously, a book which makes even any mistakes, much less as many mistakes about things, for example, misplacing where the altar is in the temple, how could that possibly be considered even a book of scripture, much less one of the best books of scripture? And that's how you engage, not by me being, oh, it's really pretty at pot.
No, okay, you're right, Jacob. But let's pretend Sam said that's my favorite book, and I'm like, Sam, I find that to be sort of curious because there's so many inconsistencies in that book that one would have to really wonder how historically they did this. Because granted, there's some portions over there where I could understand, but generally speaking, there's an issue with the continuity. There's an issue with it historically. You would have to really explain to me where you're coming at this. Now, I would assume Sam would be like, okay, so 1 second. I hear what he's saying. Let me try to answer these 7 things. And then you could get into the weeds about it. But if I just tell him like, hey, Sam, that's insane. Ipso facto, you're insane.
Hezi, this is part of the problem. You want me to spend 5 minutes doing exactly what you know who does this all the time? Glenn Lowry. Glenn Lowry is one of the most brilliant human beings to have ever lived on the face of the earth. Mm-hmm. And when you listen to him, before he says anything, he spends about half an hour explaining all of the ways he could be wrong.
If only we had long form conversation, we had time to spend 5 minutes doing that.
But Glenn's style also invites a very wide audience who might not be initially
very wide audience. Do you think Glenn Lowry has a wide audience?
Yeah,
Are you talking about Glenn and McWhorter?
And McWhorter, I mean, they regularly have tens of thousands of people listen to their weekly hour-long discussion, right? That's a pretty
tens of thousands of people. How many subscribers does Mike Winger have?
I think he probably has a few hundred.
43,000 subscribers. Glenn Lowry. That's not nothing.
That's
not How many subscribers does Mike Winger have?
Maybe 250,000. I'm not sure.
It's over 1 million.
Is it over 1 million? I thought it was less than that.
Jake, if you want to be like, you could look at it this way, Jacob. Like I would venture to guess that
490,000 for
any quote unquote like. If you were a little more sensitive, you would probably double or triple your
Mark asks a really good question. Of course, he has the wrong answer to it. Theological, can you understand the difference between theological crime scene and theologically challenging for me? Yes, I understand that absolutely and quite clearly, which is why if I were to say theologically challenging for me, I would sound like one of these leftist, mainline Christian female.
But you might have a better conversation.
Writing down my description. 1 second. Speak slower. I'm a female. Go on.
Seriously, it is inflammatory. Guess what? Yes, it is inflammatory.
But being inflammatory has
conversation. We need to do relevance realization and realize where the fire is. And the fire is not those lines I find theologically challenging in Revelation. It's the theological crime scene in Hebrews.
But so Jacob, here's part of it is like, I never bring up the book of Hebrews around you because I just know what you're going to say. Right. I'm not sure.
Theological crime scene.
Right. And then it's just going to be a hard and difficult and not very, interesting conversation. And so I just avoid that. Why is it hard and difficult?
Oh, hold on. How
surprised by that
too. Interesting conversation that's not hard and difficult.
What?
How do you have an interesting conversation that's not hard and difficult?
If it's if it feels like it is inviting of a higher level of vulnerability and curiosity, right? And that's what inflammatoriness. That's one of its side effects. Again, I'm not saying there's never any place, but being inflammatory has some strengths and some weaknesses. And one weakness is that it can cause the person to bristle up and to be more defensive and less curious and open-minded. And
Do you
But,
know
like-
why I flashed that?
yeah, because you got Jake to show up. But like for the record, Jake was also not very curious or open-minded or very flexible. I feel like I could draw that part out of him better than you can, right?
Honestly, look, if you can do a better job, please do.
Well, but
Well,
that's what I'm saying. I'm not
This
saying you
is-
don't bring different parts out of him than I do, or
Okay,
that you don't
so-
have something constructive.
So you're
but
telling me to stop being inflammatory.
Well, one sec. So I want to understand from Sam. Okay. So you said, listen, Jacob, I don't bring this up because X, Y, Z. Now, Jacob, in theory, wants you to bring that up because he's like, no, let's have the conversation. What would you be? Why would you not have the conversation with him? Let's say Jacob comes and says, let's talk about the book of Hebrews.
No.
Would your condition be like, I need to know that you're not going to lambast me if with your terminology, or like what would you need to know to have that
I
conversation?
feel like Jacob wouldn't give me the rope to hang myself with, even if I wanted to, right? Like for me to build the case of why I think the book of Hebrews is good, it would take me a while, and I would need a little bit of a leash to get that far, and have perhaps some, curious probing questions help me better communicate to you. But when the conversation starts off, it's a theological crime scene, factual error here, and here, bah, then it's like, well, I can't go where I'd want to go with the conversation. I can't get there from here, right?
Sam,
Jake-
when have I not heard you out?
Well, but Jacob, what I am telling you is that I don't bring up the book of Hebrews, because then we're going to be stuck in this inflammatory morass when there are other topics that don't bring that part of you out.
To be fair, Jacob could be like, well, then that's like where the rub, like, you mean that's where it is. If I'm getting inflammatory about that topic, like we don't have to talk about again. I mean, I'm saying, and Jacob, you could disagree. You could be like, we don't have to constantly talk about how we agree. Let's find this point of divergence. Now, Jacob, it could be yes, we need to find the places where we disagree. Does that have to happen at this stage? Does it happen later on? Like Paul said, if you want to discuss the Trinity, go off to another corner to do that. Now, maybe that's wrong. Maybe it's like, why do I need to go off to another corner? Why can't I just discuss that here in the main corner? But then I would ask, this is sort of Sam's question in a certain way. Hey, Jews, why are you here? Right? Like, are you here to convince me not to believe in Jesus? Now, I have my own opinion about Jesus, but I'm not going to Sam and be like, but every conversation, you should know, don't do that.
Chezi, my problem with this whole conversation is the pretense that there aren't basically all of society doing precisely what you are recommending I do. And then
I think
you're doing something really novel. Yeah, guess what? I am.
Well, so I actually think that the space for good faith conversation on difficult topics is exactly what this corner specializes in, and it's very, very rare, right? And that's why I'm saying I don't think this is common out in society. And you're just saying like, Jacob, hey, I'm asking you to be just like everyone else. I don't feel like that's what I'm asking of you at all.
Sam,
I feel like most people it's impossible to have good conversations with, and every once in a while it's possible to have a good one. And that's why I'm trying to push you in the direction of being, don't
Sam,
leave that spirit of that place that's very rare and hard to find.
Then I think you don't even realize what kind of space you're in and what creates it. What creates the space you're in is the fact that somebody like me is willing to say, well, of course the Trinity is idolatry.
And
Well, I guess.
Go ahead, Yezi.
Jacob, I guess in a certain
Luke
sense.
has something he wants to say.
Sorry, go ahead, Luke.
No. I mean, I often will and do all the time. This whole conversation is very interested in, and so I have lots of things to say. So I want to be back in, if possible.
Of course, we never left. We're always here in our hearts. Jacob, I would say, and Sam, I would ask you. I personally am a little hesitant, right? Like, quote unquote, to push Jacob here because Jacob, like you're saying, like this conversation is happening due to your style, right? So like we're in it. And in a certain sense, which I think I hear Sam saying, he's like, I don't want you to not be you. and like and it is rare, and this little corner is super rare. So it's almost like we're in a certain way looking at you being like, hey, you're one of these pillars. Like if you crack, that could damage the community. And you cracking could be like if there's like this, if it hits like a critical point where there's like too much, people feel like too much negativity, they can be like, well, that's their problem. It's a tight, it's a hard balance to strike. And arguably, and I think this is true, you could have people like Luke or Sam going out on the comments against people coming on saying like Jacob's being too ridiculous, saying like, no, you guys are misunderstanding him. And Paul is, you're clearly in his mind because he's doing another video, right? He did the live stream. Now he's putting it on his channel and he's prefacing it with being like, listen, this is all happening within the context of love. He's giving it a narrative because he says, I need to explain these people that are telling you like, hey, Paul, why is this guy here? And his response is, obviously he's here. He needs to be here. This is part of the conversation, but he's giving it context. And I guess what we're saying is like, Jacob, you could give it your own context, right? But like, if you just start with like, it's a crime scene, that's the context. The context, it's a crime scene. People have been murdered.
I honestly, like, okay, Luke or Sam, you were both there the first time I left Bridges of Meaning. Remember that?
I didn't know that happened. This is drama.
Yeah, but I didn't know you nearly very well back then.
I can't remember what that time was and why, but
because you also joined Discord when I was on a Easter fast, I think, from Discord.
So I joined Bridges of Meaning, and I thought I'll be me, let my hair down, what little hair I have, and just say things as I see them. And people lost their minds, as they usually do when I say the things I believe, which is normal. And I did what I generally do, which is I stopped saying these things, and I left the server. And several people, including Luke, I think, and I think Sam, but lots of people contacted me, and they said, no, you're a breath of fresh air. You're somebody who's actually saying these things. And I came back with the understanding that I'm going to be the bad guy. I'm going to say all the blasphemies that a lot of people cannot say, so that other people on the server will feel comfortable saying all the things that I cannot. That they definitely would not, because they don't. I was creating a room by pushing people. I was creating a path by pushing people out of the way, right?
But Jacob, there's a difference. I'm still going to go to the temperament thing, because a huge percentage of people in this little corner are very low in agreeableness. Like, I'm first percentile politeness. Like, technically on the scale, you cannot find someone who is less afraid to say an uncomfortable truth than me. They don't exist. But the way that you and I interact with people is very different. And so and a lot of that comes down to temperament. There's like, I think Mark Lefever's in here in the comments all over the place. Mark's not afraid to say a lot of stuff, but he's different than other people. Mark says it in a very aggressive, like, I will fight you, and if you don't like it, like, I'll shoot you in a gunfight kind of a way.
Thing. Like Mark, I mean, that's the weird thing. So Mark in the comments right now is the one who's being very critical of my style, and he's worse than I am at it.
Well,
but I think another part of it is it's not like we can't change and get better.
Yes.
It's not like we're frozen as some form of incarnation of our big five personalities that can never be improved. And Jacob, and part of what?
This is a bulverism.
Well, then let me finish my bulverism. Jacob, I think that you could be better than you are. And I think that sometimes you are not as well receptive to feedback. First on the list of things you could be better at getting better. And second on the list, be better at listening to other people who are trying to help you be better. And then after that, all the ways that you actually could be better.
Sam.
So Jacob, I fought for you more than anyone to keep you around this community when you were trying to be dumb and leave a couple months ago, and I fought harder than anyone to keep you around, exactly for that reason that, as he was saying, that you're like something like a pillar, and if a pillar crumbles, then the whole thing gets a little bit weaker. But sometimes don't over-interpret attention as flattery. That is also a very dangerous mistake to make.
Yeah,
One second. Sam,
Yeah.
do you, because something Jacob said that was interesting, many things he says are interesting, that like, I'm going to be the bad guy. I'm going to use like an MMA term because like in MMA, they have like the bad guy, right? So you're taking this on, and I could accept that, Jacob. And I think even Sam, like Sam's just expressing right now, he's saying in a certain way, the community accepts that as well, because he's saying, I'm quote unquote going to bat for you. And Paul is, and you could be like, good guys, that's the expectation. Like, I'm part of this community and I need to know that I could say what I want to say with you guys constantly protecting me, saying like, this is in good faith, and it is, and we believe you. What Sam is saying is like, okay, but like, even that has to happen within a context, like, because you're not really a bad guy. You're playing the bad guy in this context. And I could even agree with you that there's a place for quote unquote a bad guy, like the path maker, even though I think that's one of Jesus's names. But like I'm saying, you like a path maker, and that involves, yes, some people are going to get offended. And I think everyone here knows, like, okay, then like either your skin's, then you're too sensitive. But like Sam is saying, if that sort of if that's unchecked and people actually feel like it's not like he's acting the bad guy and that's challenging for me, I feel like offended, then we're crossing the line, because like, and I guess I should correct myself. Like, again, I think you could quote unquote be the bad guy. And I think that does allow you, that comes with some privileges of reacting in a more abrupt way. I guess you could say, like, I want to be able to comfortably say these things and not have to feel nervous all the time. And I think fairly speaking, the community. Okay. Sorry, guys, I gotta bounce. Jacob.
All right.
I love you.
It was my first time interacting with you, Hezzy. Nice to talk to you.
I'm saying this because I'm so super excited.
So there was somebody I was talking to. Don't end the broadcast, please. Leave studio. On the bottom.
Gotcha.
Okay. So there was somebody I was interacting with, and it was obvious that he was coming in from the outside and wasn't used to me. And like, so I commented on one of his videos, you're so wrong, I don't even know where to start. And his response was, Jacob, this is why nobody wants to talk to you. Bye. And I was like, I kind of sort of wish he was right. That
there are a lot of people who don't want to talk to you.
Oh, there are a lot of people who don't want to talk to me. This is true. But honestly, I have to say, it feels like, and I tell this story a lot of times, and it's one of these stories I wish wasn't true. I was late to an appointment at a government office. I was a little late, and the person behind the counter was watching a movie, and I couldn't get his attention for several more minutes. And then his supervisor walks in and says, have you been helped? And I'm like, no. And he's like, no, you're too late for your appointment. You're going to have to make a new one. And it was going to caused me. It was the only time I ever needed to deal with that office ever again, right? And I was like, please, can you? And he's like, no, you have to go and make a new appointment. It was going to cost me $100, and it was downtown, and I had to, it's like, as I walked away, I went, okay, I hope this doesn't work, but I know it will. And I walked back and I pretended to be angry and started loudly talking about how the guy was watching a movie when he was at work and how I was going to complain. And the supervisor's like, okay, I'll let you take your appointment. And I took my appointment and I left. Right? And I wish I lived in a world where if I hadn't been the loud a-hole and where I had just been nice and said, and what I initially did was ask very nicely and then walk away, right? That it wouldn't work. The problem is it did work. And as much as people will sell, well, that's not a long-term game. Guess what? Yes, you're right. But I'm never going to that office again in my life, right? And we live in a world where the people who want Ecclesiastes 3, I believe it is, for everything there is a time and to everything a season, right? They want, there's no reason to be inflammatory. There's no reason to.
But Jacob, almost no one's telling you that. Almost no
you
one's
pretty
telling
much
you.
are, though. But you
I'm
pretty
not
much are.
telling you that. I am not telling you that. I'm telling you, you need to be better at using your tools and your gifts and know how to use them with a little bit more precision and a little less slop.
A little bit. Guess what? You're not telling me something I don't know.
Okay, well, if you don't need this advice, then why is it that people keep giving it to you?
Well, look, it is something I know, but I also know the opposite, which you don't seem to actually.
Well, no, I mean, I'll grant you that. So when I listened to you talk to Father Stephen DeYoung, I had some thoughts like, man, I probably should have been harder on him than I was. When I, thinking about my interview with him, right? I'm a pretty nice interviewer, right? When it comes to things. And the people that especially if it's a high status person or someone that doesn't know me or a scholar or something like that, right? I'm a relatively easy interview who mainly just says, okay, why do you think? Oh, what do you think? Oh, okay. Why do you think that? All right. Let me ask a couple questions to draw your ideas out of you with very little actual pushback, right? That's often my style. And it has its advantages because it means that people aren't scared to talk to me that might otherwise be. But when I was listening to you talk to Father Stephen DeYoung, I'm like, man, I wish I had pushed him a little harder than I had. And I also think that not everyone needs to be the same. Not everyone needs to be Jacob, and Jacob doesn't need to be like everybody. Not everyone wants to be like Luke, and Luke shouldn't be like everyone else either. So, but that doesn't mean that we can't improve how we interact with each other as part of some body together.
We are.
I mean, it all depends on. I mean, this is. I'll go psychoanalytical here, and like Jordan Peterson or anything. I mean, most anyone who has a problem knows what the problem is. It's just the problem is we're not integrated. Like, we don't know what we don't want to know. Like an alcoholic knows the problem. Like, you just can't stop. And I mean, and so to some degree, when we're talking to each other or giving each other advice, you're never going to be telling someone something that they don't know on some level, probably on the most fundamental level. They're just not, living into it the best that they could.
Look, if somebody knows how to be me better than I do, and I am 100% aware that I am not perfect in any way, please show me how. Because honestly, it's very difficult being Jacob.
Yeah, it probably is.
Well, it's hard being all of us to some degree. I mean, depending. Some people are blessed with that super temperament where they're just happy all the time and don't have a lot of internal struggle.
I will say being low
and
in
I am
low in
going to say
neuroticism is
something.
nice.
I am going to say something. I have had very few callings in my life. One of the few callings I had was giving those scriptures to Runaway Rascal. So please, like, take that seriously. So Sam, tell me about the Book of Hebrews.
It lays the foundation for the spiritual Christian reinterpretation of the Old Testament in a way that is coherent and compelling. And I think that most of your criticism of the book of Hebrews is that you know full well what it's doing and you don't like it, not that it's bad at it.
No. Okay, so this is this is part of the problem. When I call Hebrews a theological crime scene, part of the reason why I call it a theological crime scene, and part of what made me so angry at you over it, was because it says things. It has an understanding of the Old Testament as the new gospel, which is on one sense incompetent, and on the other sense absolutely right, and far closer to what the Old Testament says than the Marcionite ideas of the Old Testament. And so I am guessing the things you find the most beautiful in it are precisely those things that when Tovia Singer says the New Testament is filled with new and wonderful things, the problem is the new things are not wonderful and the wonderful things are not new. That is why I call it a theological crime scene. It's stealing that which is Old Testament.
But it's because you view it through this, non-Jewish but a Christian group identity thing. That is part of it. That you can't help but think of it as a Christian book. When you have to remember, when it's being written, these lines and these delineations are not nearly as clear and obvious and stuff as we're talking about.
I think it's very, very obvious how the book of Hebrews means that to have the chutzpah to tell Jews that now we don't need the sacrifices, as if that's not something like the mistake which I called.
Well, you have to remember, it is probably written while the Second Temple is standing, right? And while sacrifices are literally being offered.
That's not what the academics think.
No, actually, there's a fair amount of academics. I've had academics on my channel specifically about the book of Hebrews, and they're like 50-50.
Yeah, I know. You have your view of an early view of the scriptures, which a lot of people don't disagree
but even
with.
the people who think it's like after the Second Temple, they're like, okay, well, maybe it's like 75 AD. And I'm saying like, well, maybe it's 65 AD, right? That's like not that giant of a thing. But I think it's most likely written while the temple was still standing, or in clear living memory of sacrifices being offered. Either way.
Living memory, and in a situation where sacrifices are being offered at other temples, yes. But what it says is what it ultimately says.
But the thing that you probably agree with is that it's spiritualizing the meaning of sacrifice. Right? That's something that you would probably generally agree with as the right move to go, is to understand sacrifice as pointing to something like a deeper truth than just as a ritual that needs to be performed
right. It's plagiarizing Isaiah and Hosea and basically the
But why are you saying it's plagiarizing if it views itself in full continuity and respectful?
But it doesn't view itself.
It
very specifically does not view itself in full continuity. It very specifically says it died away and now we have this new light and something different.
Not different.
Yes, different.
New, better, but related and connected to the whole thing. It's not plagiarizing anything. It views Isaiah as scripture and expects its audience to know Isaiah as scripture. Right? Like one of the longest sections of the book of Hebrews is it like basically goes through every Old Testament figure and talks about how important faith was in their life and how they're a model for our life. right? Like that's a weird thing to do if it's like secretly trying to plagiarize the Old Testament and doesn't view itself in direct continuity with it. It's like Moses did this, Noah did this, Isaac did this, Jacob did this, Joseph did that. Yeah, right. Like that's like 2 whole chapters. The longest single thread of thought in the book of Hebrews is like the Hall of Fame of Faith, as it's often called, of going through and praising Old Testament characters for their faith, right? That's not something that's out of the complete discontinuity with something would do, right?
You are completely rereading. I have to find. I mean, you know the book of Hebrews better than I do. Where does the book of Hebrews talk about how this newfound light and this different thing, which now in Jesus, Moses died, and the dying of the light and all that bullshit?
Well, it doesn't. I don't think it ever talks about the dying of any light or exactly what you're talking about.
But the thing is, Jacob, it's not. I mean, Christians can have
a book in the Bible, and I have to go find this.
Okay,
well,
Christians can have.
I'm not quite sure what you're referring to, but go ahead, Luke.
Christians can have a relatively nuanced view on this. Like, I mean, it's not as if Christians don't acknowledge God being he who was and is to come. And so, and like Maximus the Fester, Christ creating the world on the cross. Like this, there's no plagiarism. There's no stealing new stuff. Like it's new. It's new, but it's not new. Because what is new? There isn't anything new under the sun. Like that's all just like it's a loving condescension of speech because we have to talk that way because you're talking to beings in time, man. I mean, what are you gonna do?
Right. So all the time when Christians were talking about the Old Testament being old, they didn't.
And really, the Old Testament, Hebrews never calls it the Old Testament; it calls it the first covenant. Covenant and testament are once upon a time those 2 words were synonyms.
Okay, I did not prepare. I did not prepare for this.
Okay, well, if you don't want to talk about the book of Hebrews,
no. I do want to talk about the book of Hebrews, but there are chapters and verses that are very, very clear that if this is your favorite book of Hebrews, book of the Bible, and I have to go look them up for you, you have no idea what I'm talking about, then I don't know what to say, because I very clearly read in the book of Hebrews about how the Jews don't understand anything, and now that Jesus came, suddenly we understand everything that the Jews never knew.
Well, that there was this hidden spiritual layer to the meaning
that
of
was
the
never
whole
hidden.
Well, yes, it was.
No, it was never hidden at all.
What do you mean?
The idea that the sacrifices, that God does not want sacrifices, is not a new idea.
Hebrews doesn't necessarily claim that. It quotes the Old Testament as saying that.
It had to be embodied.
Like the same passages that you would quote saying Hebrews thinks it's saying something new, but actually these things were in the Old Testament the whole time.
Yes.
Hebrews quotes those very things. It's making the same point you're making, but you
disagree. No, it's not making the same point.
Yes, it is.
It is a theological crime scene. It is stealing. It is plagiarizing.
So when Hebrews 10 verse 5 quotes, "Sacrifices and offerings you have not desired for me, not desired, but a body you have prepared for me, and burnt offerings and sin offerings you have taken no pleasure. Then I said, behold, I have come to do your will, O God, as it is written of me in the scroll of the book." Right? That's one of the passages you would bring up about the lack of importance of sacrificial offerings, right?
Yes.
Right there in Hebrews 10. And then it goes on and it quotes Jeremiah.
And it does not, and it in no way claims that somehow this understanding is somehow a new understanding as opposed to what the scriptures always clearly said.
But that's exactly Hebrews' point. Hebrews is probably arguing against people who thought that the temple sacrifice was eternal and couldn't be taken away, and is trying to make the point that you're trying to make, that no, it was like not the point the whole time. And
so
now we see that even more clearly.
So the book of Hebrews is actually, despite what Christians have said for thousands of years, and despite what pretty much you yourself believed, understands, Judaism has always taught these things. completely in continuity. Nothing has changed whatsoever with Jesus. Everything is precisely the exact same thing we always taught.
Well, it's both what we would have expected, should have expected, but couldn't fully expect.
Why
Right?
couldn't we? Because we couldn't read?
Well, because we don't know the whole future, right? When, like, you know, when there are prophecies that get fulfilled in other parts of the Old Testament, you know, each new thing that happens, it's like, oh, both we should have known that that was going to happen, but it was also hard for us to know in full detail what it was going to look like. When there are prophecies about the exile and the return from the exile and stuff like that, okay, when the exile happens, that doesn't mean it should be surprising, but it's still surprising because you can't fully know, even through, you know, prophetic revelation, what actually things are going to look like until they happen, right? And that's the point that Hebrews is making. None of this should be too surprising if you were paying attention, but here's how we know that these are the things that were foreshadowed, that were going to happen, have actually happened. That's what Hebrews' point is. It's not plagiarizing or stealing or any of those sorts of things.
Sam, when I tell you that the Old Testament does not, I had to quote the book, the parts of Hebrews to you.
That's
right?
not
You
how I
were
remember
trying
those
to
conversations.
hear from me, and this
No,
is
I
supposedly
wasn't.
your favorite book of the Bible.
Jacob, I don't know what you're talking
Jacob, when you say that, like, what's your goal when you say that?
Say what?
What you just said to Sam, that this is his favorite book of the Bible and he can't quote it and he doesn't know it.
I'm
Like,
saying
what are you
that
trying to say? Are you saying that to
I am
invalidate
trying
his
to
point?
remind him of the conversations that we've had that now suddenly are not part of the conversation at all. I
Jacob,
never
I
said
was
anything
ne- I
surprising
always-
when I told you that Judaism does not believe that the sacrifices are essential to salvation and essential to.
Maybe you didn't give me enough time to rebuttal and you thought that your point was so good that you remembered me as being surprised when I really wasn't because you could listen a little better. That might be a more accurate way to remember those conversations. But Jacob, yes, I know that those verses are in the book of Hebrews and that they're in the Old Testament. Believe it or not, I've read the Old Testament a few times. And, you know, that my whole point is that Hebrews is using the Old Testament to make the points that it's making. It's saying we have a clear understanding of what has happened because of Jesus, but many of these things were either prophesied or foreshadowed or what have you. And here's how we can connect the dots with what has happened with what we were told was going to happen.
All right, my headphones are gonna. May I say one thing, and then I gotta go because my headphones are dying. You search the scriptures because in them you think you'll find life, but you don't realize it's they that testify about me. I mean, the whole point of Christianity is taking things and making them personal and further down.
And
I mean,
about
it
Jesus.
just that's because that's what that all is. That's who Christ is. Christ, the only existent one. So, all right. Peace, guys.
Bye.
Sartor, you had something to say.
Well, I mean, I was just saying, I was trying to get into the conversation before it just turned into let's debate about Paul, the Trinity, or Hebrews, which, I mean, I think is probably Paul too. But, I mean, I think you say the argument can be good, but if it always has to be the same argument, that's a little repetitive. And then there is a lot of that on YouTube. I mean, there's, I had no interest in being on YouTube while I did know that there was apologists of different religions arguing with each other. I was well aware that existed. It had no, made no strong impact that I needed to participate. I think that people are making channels to explore things. Like that's the thing. That's what I saw from PVK that made me want to get on YouTube. Like, oh, I can explore stuff. Because even though I don't have probably Sam's level of concern about getting kicked out of church for saying something wrong, there is within any local church probably a feeling of like, what can we what of my thoughts can I say out loud that might be wrong? And that's a restrictive thing, and I think everybody goes through that. So, and obviously, we're interested in knowing the truth. I mean, I would say we're Christians because we believe in the resurrection, right? Sam still believes in that, right? Yeah. So, and not just because of the facts. The facts, I think strengthen our faith when we have doubts about things, but it's because it's self-evidently true. It's because it's caused an experience of transformation in our life. But we do know that, I would say all of Christianity has been wrong to some degree or another, and it will continue to be wrong until Jesus comes back. And we're trying to figure that out. And obviously now Christianity is much more amenable to recovering what it knew of Judaism. So that's why we're here.
Jess, it's all you.
It's all me. I just want to be here. I just want to hang out with you guys. I mean, I don't really have any dog in the fight other than I think I like Hebrews. I think it's an important link between the Old and New Testament for us Christians. As far as like the type of conversation that we should have about it, like in your approach, Jacob, like I don't really have any problem with it. Like the confrontational stuff, but I say that we haven't really had any confrontation about things, but I try to avoid that at all costs just from my temperament. But I've had, intense conversations on the Discord, or that I would say were intense for me. Like I'll just say like Mark Lefevre, like I've had some conversations with him where afterwards I was like, what the hell was that? Like, why was he? Because he's very confrontational about stuff, and he'll tell you what he thinks. And so, like, sometimes I'm like, I like felt like I wasn't heard, or he wasn't like a little bit.
Yeah, he doesn't listen very much.
Yeah, but then also, like, when I think it was, where was it? I came into the voice chat the other day, and he was in there, and we were chatting, and I found myself wanting to ask him something about some ideas about Vervaeke stuff because he's more familiar with it. And I really value his like opinion about some things. And I really like running things by him because I know he'll say what he thinks. Like I don't have to like, and if, and there's value in when I say something about something and then someone says, I don't get it. That's dumb. Like I can appreciate that, even though maybe in the moment I'll feel misunderstood and maybe frustrated about it. Overall, like, I mean, I haven't had any really conflicting arguments on the Discord that have been kind of like deal breaking, where I'm like trying to avoid people or whatever. But I guess there's been times when there's been conversations happening that have been, maybe people have been engaged in antagonism and debate. And usually when it's usually when it's about Protestant stuff, some debate about Calvinism or, total depravity. Like, I don't want to debate that. Like, I'm annoyed by all that. So like, I'll avoid those things, and I don't want to talk about that on that level, on the sort of the debate level. But then when it comes to like your ideas, Jacob or Sam, and you guys are passionately defending things, like I just love it. like there's a vitality there, as long as you guys are like, if Sam like was like, shut off his camera, leaves, and then starts a blog about how terrible Jacob is, then I'm like, okay, things have gone too far. But I love the debate, as long as everyone is aware. Like, I know you, Jacob, as well as I can know you, and I know kind of how you are. So when you say Hebrews is a theological train wreck, I kind of get what you're saying, and I'm kind of interested why you would think that. But you know, that kind of statement also isn't like shaking my own. You know, I just kind of want to get into it. I'm like, okay, you said this inflammatory statement. I know it's inflammatory. I know it's not like, you know, I don't ever take it as, therefore, Jess, you're a complete moron and I hate you. I just take it as like, all right, why is it a theological train wreck? Like, I don't get it.
I do have to say that the conversation we're having is curated, and the people that we are talking to, there are people who could show up and I would remove them from the conversation and say, you're just too dumb to have this discussion with. And that comes from actually listening to people. And actually listening to people includes understanding when they have no clue what they're talking about and when they are not capable of understanding what you are saying, right? So when all four of you are people who have high roles on my Discord server, whose voices I have tried to amplify, right? And I'm constantly trying to amplify your voices. And there are other people that I just tell to shut up.
Yeah.
And there is a feeling among a lot of people that there's no place for telling people to shut up. There's one person, and he knows who he is, who I kind of had to shut up. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done. But I had to do it because sometimes some people, despite how much you love them, and I do love you, you have to tell them to shut up. No, it wasn't you, Chad.
Sorry. I wonder why I'm even how have I made it through and been able to stay on your channel, because I everything that you guys just talked about the book of Hebrews, which I didn't even know existed, was the dumbest thing I've ever heard in life. And I think like the idea of theology, oh my God, does it irritate me? Because it's like it doesn't seem like there's anything truly personal about it. And I think like it's hard to say, because like here's what happened when I got into this corner of the internet, when I started hearing people like Jonathan Peugeot talk about how bad it is to be solipsistic. So now I'm like, okay, so now I'm a piece of shit because I believe in a God of your own understanding. And so now if I talk about how I think theology is dumb because it took somebody's particular ideas about something and then like propagated it and turned it into like the system that we believe in and we follow, which made a bunch of stupid people stupider and more disconnected than ever. Like, but like when I say something like theology is garbage, people get really mad at me, and I'm like, I don't understand how it is that you don't understand that theology is garbage. Like, okay, because like when I say the word theology, I'm thinking of like the study of something. Like theology to me sounds like some sort of a scientific expression of or investigation into the nature of God, which is totally asinine. So I don't know. Like, to me, it doesn't leave a lot of room for the personal, is all I'm saying. So, like, when we say I'm a Calvinist or whatever, Lutheran.
You just update it to English and say knowledge of God. Then you won't say it's trash.
But it's not. It's not knowledge of God. It's the study. It's the study of it. It's theology. It's like biology. What do you do in biology? You rip a body apart and you study it. And it's not the same as having a dog and having a friend in your pet, right? You see what I'm saying? It's in biology, and it's like biology doesn't make up the relationship I have with my wife. You understand what I'm saying? So, like, that's how I'm viewing theology. That's why I think it's more divisive than it is something that it's not a love letter. It's like it's a thing that I use to tell you how the book of Hebrews is good, or a thing I use to tell you how the book of Hebrews is a theological crime scene. Whereas I say theology is the crime scene.
So let's talk about my favorite piece of writing attributed to Paul, which is 1 Corinthians 12, right? And where he talks about the different parts of the body, right? And Christians understand this as different parts of the body of the church. I think it's different parts of the body of humanity as a whole. And there's a reason why I keep on saying I want to be Chad the alcoholic when I grow up, is because you do contribute a certain thing, right? So in order to walk, we need two legs, right? We have to have a right leg and we have to have a left leg. We have to put one in front of the other, sometimes putting more weight on one, sometimes putting more weight on the other. And so when Paul talks about his consciousness congress, right? So I say this about pacifists. I'm not a pacifist, but I always want there to be a pacifist who, in every situation, says all war is wrong, even though it's obvious that that person is wrong, right?
Maybe we should just try to like eliminate the word obvious, because I feel like if Vervaeke has taught us anything, it's that what is obvious to one person is almost certainly not obvious to everybody else. So,
well, this is the thing. I mean, if
shouldn't that be given? Shouldn't that be obvious? And then we can just say what we obviously see.
all language is contextual. It's just like Paul yesterday focusing in on me saying this is where Christianity loses its mind, right? And being like, well, you're saying Christianity is crazy. And well, for me, first of all, I don't think sanity is binary anyway. And I think we're all crazy in certain bits. And so for me to say this is where you lose your mind is actually very, very precise speech, because I am pointing at the place where I think you are in fact losing your mind, as opposed to the idea that I could possibly believe you were ever not, that that any of us don't have a place where we lose our mind, right? But again, all of this stuff is contextual, and it requires the chutzpah, the willingness for somebody to be like, what are you saying? Right? Why are you saying that? And actually try to understand and listen. And at the same time, where I say that, you know, how important it is to listen. At the same time, you know, if Paul's channel was just the Freddie and Paul show, guess what? I would not be a subscriber. And there is a place for meritocracy and hierarchy. And these tensions between, you know, various values, and these tensions between trying to walk that bridge, right? Going back to Paul says, "How dare you?" Honestly, I know how protective Paul is of Freddie, and so I was actually a little bit worried about even making that thing. But and by the way, I love the fact you're so protective of Freddie, Paul. But look, there are these tensions, and what I often seem to hear from a lot of people is they don't actually believe there's a time to kill and a time to wound and a time to, especially a lot of people in our little corner. And it's like, no, I'm sorry. You know what? Maybe I am taking out the sword way too often. But you guys are all pacifists.
No,
Yeah.
everybody's a pacifist until they have to not be a pacifist.
The guy got here. The big guy is here.
Ooh.
We're gonna give him the stage.
What up, Paul? I'm just happy to be like right on top of Jess, to be honest.
You're happy to be what?
On top of Jess.
On top of
High
Jeff.
five, Chad.
Oh no, you're right, Jacob. I didn't hear everything. I just dropped in, and but no, if
We've only been going for 2 hours.
Wow, it's 2 hours.
Oh. I don't need the stage. I'm here to listen.
No. See, this is part of your problem, Paul. You're Moses. You're the homeroom teacher.
So about your statement about pacifism there, you know, like I don't know, it was maybe 7 months ago or whatever. Paul is talking about. He was remembering back when in September 11, 2001, the feelings that he had that were going through. That was a relatable thing, and that's why I don't think, even though people on here can say we're pacifists, and of course we shouldn't want to kill and those different things. But like, if you're in a position, you could say all day long you're a pacifist until you have no option than to not be one. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's like, yeah, it's a good ideal, it's a good aim, and it's something good, I think, to tell ourselves that we have strong hopes to be pacifists, if that's what you want to be. But that's just, I can't hold too rigidly to those ideas either. Just like I think theology is garbage, I'm not so rigidly held to the idea that theology is garbage, but mostly it is.
Your daughter has to say hi, Michael.
Okay. Can you say hi?
Howdy.
He's
Hi.
waving at you. What about that Michael Brown? He's pretty good, huh?
Dr. Michael Brown?
Yeah, he knows a lot of stuff
Oh yeah,
about
he's
Judaism.
my favorite.
I mean, I
I'm
do
not
know.
sure we want to go there.
Well, just so you know, now that I know that if I put clips on my channel that you think I'm throwing them at you, it's very tempting to just put whenever you say something, I just go look and see if you're right about it. And then I put a clip on, and then I just make it private and I pray for you instead. So that's what I do.
Michael Brown, I mean, he's worked really, really hard over the years to justify his theology. And it's interesting seeing someone grasp at straws so long, so much. Oh, wow, there's 2 of them.
Okay, I'm reading in this book, and Chad's comment, theology is garbage. I wanted to talk about this, or I just want to read this. Of course, the book is about Job, human consciousness and God.
Do you ever read any books not about Job?
I feel like I'm I don't know, I'm narrowing myself down too much, but it's just the time of my life. All right. So in each response of his 3 friends, the first round of these 3 exchanges, Job includes speaking to God. The friends, on the other hand, and Elihu after them speak about God, but never to God. Job, of course, also speaks about God, but the poet thus brings about a distinction which may further be illustrated by two examples. This is what the book says. I don't know this for the sake for. I don't know if this is absolutely true, but the first is from Christian history and practice. The Western Church, Catholic, Roman, and Protestant, usually use the word "quote unquote" theologian to represent somebody who engages in thoughts and words about God. On the other hand, the Eastern body of Christians, the Orthodox, use the word for someone who is adept in practicing the presence of God, as in the example of Saint Simon. So Western Christians, of course, practice the presence of God, but the point here is just the difference in the way the word theologian is used. I thought, I don't know, that was coming to mind because, we're talking about like Jacob, when you say Hebrews is a trash pile, we're like, I'm not interested in the semantic information in that sentence. Like there's a whole context here where like I'm like, I know what you're saying. I think I know what you're saying until you like I don't know, until you do something evil or devious that kind of is beyond just the disagreeable type of conversation. And that's so another thing, like I was thinking about, so this, well, first of all, like when Chad says, theology is trash, that's another one of those statements, but like, I know what kind of he's saying, like the sort of right or left brain, I forget what brain it is, left brain centric thinking about thoughts and ideas. He's not talking about the idea of theology as practicing the presence of God, and as well, like there's even a mystical type of theology where it's theology applied to your own spirit and soul. And I know he's not talking about that either. He's talking about this thinking about thoughts, the sort of just masturbating about ideas and never applying it, mystically or practicing it. Because I know Chad is a guy who's all about practices and actually interested in mystical things. So there's that, and then kind of related to that is when Job, after his disaster, he has the famous lament in chapter 3 where he laments the day he was born, and then he says stuff like, I want people to rouse up Leviathan to uncreate me and undo my life so that I was never conceived, because, my suffering's so terrible that not only has the meaning been stripped from my life in the present, it actually makes everything else that's my life of blessedness meaningless too, because none of this makes sense anymore. So he's like, the only solution is to curse myself, wish I wasn't born, and to, and he uses curses, he uses language of laments, he uses all this stuff, and so people have a hard time, like, so that's one example of something Job says that's difficult for people to square with, when God says in the end, he's like, Job spoke what is right and you didn't, to the friends. And so and I think it's more like what Job says is true from where he's at. It's not, it's not just totally subjective. Like, Job is in this spot and this is how it looks, and this is what this is how it is for him. And so you can say what Job is saying is true and right, but it's not something you want him to like put into practice and like recite and then make into a liturgy about, like, all right, kids, let's gather around. We're going to curse the day of our birth and call up Leviathan and wish to be uncreated because what Job said was true and right. That's not what So it's not the semantics of what Job is saying, because there's even I would even go so far to say that Job commits heresy, not necessarily there, but he commits heresies, but God is unconcerned with the semantic heresies because it actually comes from a pure heart. So Job has a heart of integrity, and it doesn't from that place of integrity. It's like a little child. Like a little child may say something stupid and wrong, and you can say to the child that wasn't right. But there's a way in which if the child is talking from they're just like, they're frustrated and they say, "This is the worst day ever," something like that. And like a good father doesn't say, "Now let's think about this. Is this really the worst day ever? Do you think you had a worse day than so-and-so who died in a plane crash?" Or, whatever and you're missing the point of what the kid is saying. And the kid, I'm assuming the kid in this situation is not trying to be manipulative, is just expressing themselves out of the purity of their heart. And so I think that's what we see with Job. Even though we don't want to turn his lament into a liturgy and a practice, we can say what he said is true and right because of where it comes from. And so anyway, all that to say, like, that's what I try. I try to be cognizant of that, like in conversations, especially with people that are, I'm super hyper agreeable, and I'm really sensitive to like other people and how they're looking at me and what they're doing and all this stuff. And so when someone's like really disagreeable and whatever, like I try to get a sense of like, where are they coming from, rather than like, what's the semantics of their sentences, saying something like Hebrews is a train wreck, like I'm just like, I think Jacob's coming from a good spot, even though I don't agree with him. And I'm not really concerned with like all the semantics in that. And then I want to explore that, because that's kind of, we talked about this corner being about exploration and not necessarily debate, but I don't mind the debate aspect of it if it's coming from a pure heart as much as I can sort of tell. And I don't know, like you can tell when someone's trying to be manipulative in a conversation and try to and it's so nuanced that I can't even explain like what the difference is between someone being argumentative and disagreeable from a good heart, and then trying to be manipulative and and not acting in good faith. You just sort of have this feeling and you just be like, all right, you're not acting in good faith, and I can't really participate in this anymore, at least. So I don't know. Those are some thoughts I have.
So I want to pose to you guys the question that we talked about earlier, and I'm going to restate the thing because I know you guys weren't all listening. So I quoted a rabbi from hundreds of years ago in my discussion with Father Stephen Dion, where he says that the Nazarene, meaning Jesus, did a great thing for Jews and for Gentiles. And he says really nice things about Christians. And one of the things, oh, wow. Wow.
Hey, it's Joey. Dude, nice mustache, bro.
Thank you.
Shit.
It's party time.
We got the big guy here.
Very nostalgic.
And
it's like the good old days.
I translated the entire statement exactly as it was. And then today, Chezi again read that statement and he translated it. And he left out two words in the Hebrew, which basically translated it, which was part of the thing. Like, one of the great things that Christianity did is so that the Gentiles shouldn't be idolaters, like wild animals, right? He left that like wild animals out, right? And he was saying, hey, leaving that little bit out and making the blow a little softer, that's just being sensitive. And whereas I wanted to say, in the context in which we speak today on the internet, if I soften the blow of my translations from the Hebrew like that, somebody's gonna pick that out and say, see, he's being manipulative. He's not being honest. He's not giving you the full story. So the question does become, like, which is better? Do you leave that little clause like wild animals out or not?
It's
Can you read
wisdom.
the quote again, real quick?
Go ahead, Chad.
Can you read the quote again?
Well, yeah. Let me pull up the exact quote. But
I was to
while
say,
I do that, why don't you?
I don't know how I'm supposed to refer to the people that rebelled against Rome without you saying the Jews. So, I mean, I don't know what's.
Okay, so the quote is from Rabbi Yaakov Emden and printed in Seder HaOlam. And if I can find it. Hanotzri asa tova kefula ba'olam. The Nazarene did a double goodness in the world. Mitzad echad, from one side, chizak Torat Moshe bechol oz. He strengthened the law of Moses in all strength, with all strength. Ve'ein echad mechachmenu, and not one of our sages, shediber yoter mizeh, who spoke more like of these things, bepeh maleh, with a full mouth, completely, bechiyuv kiyum nitzchi leTorah, in the eternal necessity to keep the law, umitzad acher, and from another side, leumot haolam, for the Gentiles, heitiv harbe, he improved many things. Shabital avodah zarah, that he took away idolatry, hesir hapisilim, and he removed the idols, mehem, from them, v'chiyev otam b'sheva mitzvot b'nei Noach, and he required of them the 7 commandments of the covenant of Noah. Shelo yihyu kebehamot hasadeh. This is the clause that he left out, that they shouldn't be like wild animals. V'zika lahem b'midot musriut, and he gave them the merit of good ethics. Notzrim hem hakeilot shepeolot l'shem shemayim. Christians are congregations that work for the sake of heaven. Shenoadu lehesigam, that they can be known by what they do. Kavanatam hi l'shem shemayim. Their intent is for the sake of heaven. V'scharam lo yimaneh, and they will not lose out on their reward. So he left out that little part. And honestly, this quote, I don't have the entire quote. It has ellipses in it already. But this one part, Chezi didn't think was necessary to translate, that they shouldn't be like wild animals. And, there's a lot of people who think that Jews think of Gentiles as a whole as wild animals. And let's face it, there are in fact Jews who do in fact think that. But that, like, all of that apart, right? At what point do we stop do we stop censoring and stop? I'm not sure I like this word, but pussyfooting around.
Language is something we use to achieve goals. Figure out what you need to do to achieve your goal. There are times when you shock someone by your language. There are times when you soften it. That's how we use language.
Correct. And part of the issue I think we're having as a society is it's a lot easier when I am talking one-on-one to someone, when I'm having a conversation with Paul at over lunch, or we're driving somewhere and we're just having a discussion between us, and then these discussions that we're having, that it's the five of us, and I would buy every single one of you a beer except Chad, but there's this video is gonna get at least 100 views, and I don't know half of the people who, like, I certainly don't know the names of who's going to be listening.
I don't know.
Joey, say something.
I mean, I have thoughts on politeness. I saw Roderick, who I've met, and Luke were in the comments section, and both of those guys lean very heavily into the being nice aspect of things, and especially in the realm of the internet, I think the problem with that very true, probably very appropriate, especially when you're working with younger people, when you're working with the general public in like a normal business. Niceness is absolutely a virtue in that area. The problem is once you get into an online realm, there's the Jordan Peterson thing of he talks about, like there's the expectations of behavior that men essentially in the real world, well, there's a line you don't cross when you get too close. Like there's a line you don't want to cross. You don't want to go over that line when you're in person because it might have real physical consequences. But online, there is no such line. And then you can have people who use nice language to be incredibly manipulative and incredibly abusive and incredibly dishonest online. And then if they don't use that language, to Jacob's point, then they could be accused of being liars because they remove the most offensive sub-portion from a passage, even if the person who's doing the translation doesn't think that it's like the most important part of the passage. So what is it? Is it Jacob? It's not Jacob's law. What's the law of Murphy's law of everything that bad that can happen will happen? On the internet, that's very true. And so the less specific you are when you're speaking on the internet, there's a larger range of ways it can be interpreted. And I mean, part of my opinion on how to deal with that is you do have to build the individual personal relationships with people if you want to get any communication actually done. There's no shortage of people in the comments section who think that stuff that Paul Vanderklay says is super offensive, and that blows my mind because like there's people who think that like an estuary meetup where people just are going to sit around and talk to each other in a circle is like the most offensive and dangerous thing that could possibly happen on the internet, and that blows my mind. It's not even on the internet. It's like you're talking to people in person. It's like, have you ever ordered a sandwich? Like, I mean, if you can order a sandwich, you can go to an estuary meeting, and that's to the credit of estuary of that's how approachable it is. It's just like I don't. So that concern trolling thing comes up. That's like the next thing this whole conversation makes me think about. And I think that the concern trolling is it's a form of manipulative, controlling abuse. And what I hate more than people being mean to me is when people pretend they're being nice to me and they're being mean to me. And I don't know if that's something that other people feel as acutely as I do, or if that's kind of just my personal pet peeve.
Please describe concern trolling, because I think it's a really, really important concept that a lot of people don't know.
Concern trolling would be when somebody, especially without prompt, like if I asked somebody for feedback on something, then maybe they can sugarcoat it a little bit because they know me, or because they don't feel it's their place to give the full hard truth, or maybe they only want to give me a portion of the hard truth in that particular moment because they don't think I can handle the full truth all at once. But concern trolling is especially when people are not asked for their input, come in and they do that hand wringing of, oh, I don't know if this is a good idea, or I don't know what's going to happen if you do this. And they greatly overstate, especially the risks. And to use the specific example I was just using, like for Estuary, which again is just a very approachable, generally nice group of people who this is an opportunity to go to a meetup group where you talk about stuff, like very humane stuff, and the concern trolls are like, well, what if somebody says something that might not be biblically accurate? And then we all know from this corner of the internet that biblically accurate is a very large range of things to be said as well, because it seems like the more the believers all agree on something, the more they argue about it. So the less it seems like they agree on something. So that just goes into a spiral as well. So you're never going to make it that safe. And the concern trolls are the ones who want to shut you down, or they want to shut down a project that you're working on, or they want to bother you while you're skateboarding. Essentially, the don't bother children while they're skateboarding. Yes, the thing that you're doing might have a little bit of risk to it, but they're going to overstate that risks for the purpose of shutting you down. And they could do that for a variety of their own personal motivations. They might even be genuine. They might even be genuine and worried about you. But I think for the most part, it's used in modern society, especially on the internet, to try and shut down the projects of others.
Couldn't agree more.
I disagree.
Yeah, I get that. I got that from my first pastor about AA, and he was like, what did he say? They're in error. They're doing good stuff, but they have that God of your own understanding, and it's like, have you even read the literature? And no, but it's like that. It drives me nuts. The other thing that drives me nuts, I had this. We just met with this financial advisor last night, and before every comment he made, he said, "I'm gonna ask you this question," and he has to set it up and do this weird thing. It's like, just get to the thing, guy.
The modern professional restrictions on what they're allowed to tell you or not tell you is just, it's so frustrating. I don't know if that's purely an American thing, but your realtor can't give you any advice, your financial advisor can't give you advice, your lawyer can barely give you advice.
Okay, this is an actual regulation I have to follow, and as of October 1st, I have to record every conversation I have with a Medicare beneficiary and retain records of it for 10 years. I am not allowed to use superlative statements like anything that says best.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then we're all relatively smart guys, and I know how frustrating it is for us, but I can only imagine somebody who's, about average or a little bit above average and trying to make a decision, and they're paying a decent amount of money to get someone's professional opinion on something, and then they can't even get an opinion on the thing that they're asking about. I don't know. I don't know how a lot of people can operate through the world, and more power to them, I suppose.
when we went to take Ferris and when he was sick, and we were going through that whole thing for like that whole week. We met with the the veterinarian like 3 times, and every time we were meeting with her, she was always like trying to really ease us into the whole thing. And at some point, there was like, I had told her, I said, you could just tell us if this was your dog, like how would you operate here? Like, can you give me some direct stuff, because it's like so frustrating, especially when you're looking to somebody of authority. And I wonder, this might have something to do with Jacob, your thing about people and being called doctor or being called wearing the collar or whatever it is. Like, we totally disconnected from. We have like this weird relationship with authority. I don't know where it begins or where it began, but I think about that, and it's tied to this thing where we're always kind of, as you said, pussyfooting around everything all the time. Like, can we just? That's what I like about these conversations. That's what I appreciate about you. It's like, even Paul or all you guys, it's like, just put the shit out there. Let's just say this, because for crying out loud, like Joey said, we're grown people. Like, why?
Well, I think there has to be a faith in the logos ultimately, and this is why I've said this several times to several people. I think keep on calling him Paul Vervaeke. John Vervaeke is the most important intellectual alive today, because one of the things he has made so clear to me, like his example of the guy who says, "Excuse me, I'm out of gas," and I respond, "There's a gas station down the block." Like, those 2 sentences are things that no computer can understand at all. Like, just those 2 sentences have so much laden into every word, right? Excuse me, right? Oh, I'm only going to be a minute. I'm not going to talk to you for long. I need something, there's something urgent. Now we have puppies. Damn, Michael, you're trying to make this stream really popular. I'm out of gas.
This is a stray dog that's available for adoption if anyone's interested.
Oh, okay.
What area are you in? Let the people know.
Texas, San Antonio.
Okay. I was going to say, you have to be a little bit more specific than Texas.
It's the land of abandoned dogs, so it's, yeah.
Texas actually ships dogs to other states.
Yeah, he's on a list apparently, but yeah, we've had him for like 3 months now, so he just showed up one day.
Well, this is part of the problem with global warming. In other states, it gets cold and all the stray dogs die, but that doesn't happen in Texas, and so Texas gets a lot more stray dogs than the states that get much colder. Yeah. So Paul, say something. We're approaching. We've passed 2.5 hours, and at 3 hours, I turn into a pumpkin because I do have actual work to do in my life.
Well, I got to get out pretty soon too, but I now understand you better, Jacob, because if you have that regulation governing your tongue, then by the time you get to us, you're just full of stuff you have to get out, and it's Paul and it's Hebrews and it's So now I know. Now I know.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that's 100% of it. I think it might partially be the fact that I don't abide by it, and I do go against what you call the Calvinist idea within Judaism of like, yeah, we need to just be quiet and let let everybody, there. It's funny.
Calvinism is not pacifism. If you've known Calvinists, they can be pretty.
There's Doug Wilson.
There's Doug Wilson. There's a Calvinist on the internet.
I like Doug Wilson. He's
sharp.
Although there's a lot I disagree with him on, and he's talking about things like, yeah, we need to be a Christian nation, and everybody who is part of our government should be Christians. It's like, not sure I agree with you there, but
He's clever. He's a good writer.
He actually, I think, recognizes that he's making opening bids the same way that Donald Trump does, right? And last night's election results, I went to a Republican party, and we were sitting there looking at the results, and we're like, okay, if Dr. Oz can't win against somebody who's literally brain damaged.
That's party politics, my friend.
It means that ultimately, and this is what the guys who are far more involved in the actual decisions and are going to have much more influence than I ever will in who becomes the Republican nominee, were kind of saying was, this is why we have to run Trump and we can't run even DeSantis, because we have to have somebody who energizes the base, because obviously the running anyone moderate is, I said this and I hate the fact that it's true, but it is true. If Joe Biden were to vote as a Republican, all the people who would have their hair on fire because of Trump being president would not vote for Joe Biden as a Republican either.
Well, Joe Biden, Donald Trump lost to somebody who's basically brain damaged, so I don't know how it's going to help anything. So I tried looking for my election results in my state last night, and can't get any real answers anywhere as to who my governor is. I don't know if it's still Evers or if it's this other dude, but I didn't vote, and the only reason why I didn't vote is because the last time I voted, I'm pretty sure something nefarious happened, and that was the only time I've actually ever voted. So, and I never voted until that time, because I always believed that if I were to vote, it'd probably be done with an ill-informed set of circumstances, or something nefarious would happen. And look what happened. I voted, and well, Trump lost to somebody who's brain damaged.
See, it's good that the masks is mumbling Chad's words a little bit, so the transcript doesn't pick it up, and then you won't automatically get a strike on your channel, Jacob. So
this would be the height of irony, that Jacob now is closer than ever to arriving at this little corner TBN 24-hour dream, and his channel gets struck down because of loose political talk. That would be hilarious.
It would be hilarious, but it would be the type of thing that goes on in right now as far as censorship.
Well, so okay, what's happened though in the last couple of years that makes that less of an issue is, I'm going to go back to, now you have personal relationships. If this channel got nuked tomorrow and you started doing the same work somewhere else, well, part of YouTube has an advantage. You wouldn't get all the subscribers back, but if you were going to do this exact same thing, try and keep it going somewhere else, a lot of the core people who are keeping up with you would follow you there too, or would keep up with you through other means. Like, none of these connections, I did not know any of you 4 years, well, maybe 4 years ago I met you, Paul, but like 5 years ago I didn't know any of you. I'll leave it at that. And now you can't get rid of me, and I can't get rid of all you.
We love it.
Oh,
I just can't quit this corner.
That's true. And it's funny. I wanted to say something because there's a lot of people in the comment section that complain about censorship, that their comments don't get through. And I say repeatedly, there's only twice that I've deleted comments, with the exception of obvious spam, which is usually porn or crypto. And it's so funny, but people are like, the censorship here. It's like, it's all YouTube, and it's not me. I never saw your comment in the first place. So,
and YouTube does a lot less censorship than Twitter and Facebook. Twitter and Facebook are really heavy-handed, and too many people don't realize that. This is one of the things I actually spoke with Rick Grinnell, who was,
I'm on. Good to see you, Joey.
Mark, I was just about to end the stream, but you joined.
Just about to end it. Why
I've
would
got
you-
about 5 minutes anyway, so.
I have to go soon, so I was going to give it another 4 minutes. But if you have something you wanted to say, navigating patterns, by the way, people.
did you hear Chad mention your channel name yesterday?
No, I didn't hear it the other day. No.
We're all promoting your channel, Mark. We're all there for you.
I tell you, I picked up a bunch of people because they saw Catherine on other channels and then came to see Catherine's talk on my channel about the intimacy crisis. So I picked up like 4 subscribers in 2 days. I was like,
woohoo!
Yeah, it's good. It's good. No,
my channel, since Father Steven's been on my channel, wow, I've gained like a bunch of subscribers.
Yeah. I did want to, I know you want to go, and that's fine. I did want to, give support, because I like your project. I like what Paul said about it before and this time too, right? Like, you're getting closer to that goal, and I think it's a good project, right? I mean, I don't know that you're aiming a little too high or whatnot, but it's good to try to get that going, right? And I think that if you can get good moderation of conversations, Joe Rogan self-moderates pretty well. And the schedule going, it could be a very important thing, because we are having better conversations to some extent.
So I am actually, and I'll end with this. I am talking to Jeff and Catherine about something that's more structured, so that my TBN idea will actually, possibly on Randos United, maybe not, will actually be a 24/7 channel that has at most a 7-day backlog. So if anybody wants to go see the but it's streaming 24/7. So, and whoever's programming it, and we're going to have to decide some form of, structure for who the nominee is. Catherine, surprise, surprise. But somebody who's actually scheduling the program for the entire week and making the decisions of who moves where.
Yeah.
And my idea was to have at least 2 to 3 hour blocks, right? And so people from different channels can, you have a Bible study. Father Eric is starting a Catholic discussion group at 5 p.m. Sundays, my time. And, maybe we'll let Paul have a Q&A. We have to decide on that.
No. You get platform Protestants. Come on.
There are various things we could be doing, but but getting a channel that's it won't have a backlog. I think that's the important part. It won't have a backlog.
Yeah, that's part of it. Then you're not creating more content forever. But yeah, I mean, we live in this postmodern era where people want to reject structures that have worked for a long time in industries like TV, and instead of recognizing, no, they just became corrupt. But the structure is correct, so you just want to replicate the structure, and everything will be fine. You want to replicate the structure with good people because we got bad people. Right.
Structure is good, and trying things is good, and especially in this environment where a lot of the things we do, they cost time, sure, and you don't want to lose. You don't want to just give away time needlessly for free. But also, as long as you're working on a project with at least one other person, then you're still building a relationship. You're attempting something. It's no less meaningful than working on a classic car with somebody or doing something like that. And like the more things we experiment with and the more things we try, and by we, I just mean everyone who I like, who I'm friends with. Like, I want all of my friends to try and do other things. And then if they've got other friends who I don't even like, those friends, those people should do things too. And maybe they'll do something great and prove me wrong, and then I'll say sorry, but I think that's kind of where we're at, is we've decided we're a group of people. We deserve to, do our things, and we deserve to have hobbies and be able to talk to each other. I think that's the step, is we just keep existing. Like, it doesn't have to be the final answer to every problem. It doesn't have to be the one structure that's gonna, like, I've been using the analogy in the comment sections. We don't have to build a Tower of Babel. Like, that's completely unnecessary. We can build lots and lots of little churches and cathedrals and cottages and towns and everything else. And that's what the internet's for, in my opinion. It's untapped. It's free real estate. It's, do whatever you want, and we'll keep coordinating. We'll keep in touch, and occasionally we'll go to a wedding and have a couple drinks, and it'll be great.
Okay, Prophet Zacharias, you are being tasked with making all kinds of memes of Paul Vanderklay as Paul Crouch, because he is going to be the leader of our new TBN. And you get the last word, and then I am ending this broadcast.
Okay, I'm going to say I'm out. Thanks for doing this. It's a great project, Jacob. Enjoying it.
Paul?
I'm just waiting. This is the first step. Once I get my office really dialed in, then I start gold plating everything. And I want to be surrounded by women in their 60s and 70s wearing permanent makeup with lots of blue hair. And then I'll turn political. But which way?
Bye, everybody.